Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack what is, honestly, one of the most astonishing achievements in the history of our species. We're going to uncover exactly how our ancestors successfully colonized nearly every single continent on Earth, except Antarctica, for obvious reasons, without a single map, a compass, or, a helpful smartphone voice telling them to make a U-turn. No GPS, no combustion engines, and no modern understanding of global weather systems. It's just wild to think about.
It really is the ultimate mystery, isn't it? How on earth did humanity manage to spread across the entire habitable surface of the planet using just raw, accumulated human ingenuity? When you really stop and think about it, finding your way across a completely uncharted planet sounds totally impossible. But the answer to how we actually pulled it off, it fundamentally changes how we view human progress. Okay, let's dive right into this by shattering a pretty massive myth. When we think of ancient migration, we almost always picture this single heroic explorer deciding to pack up and march all the way from Africa to Australia in one epic movie-worthy journey. But reality is completely different. Ancient humans, especially hunter-gatherers, weren't migrating for the thrill of discovering new horizons. They were driven by the embarrassingly simple need for food and resources. They tracked migrating herds, followed seasonal plants, and moved away from depleted areas. It was a slow, multi-generational ripple. It's a great reminder that monumental human achievements often happen sort of by accident, just by trying to survive day to day. A group might only move a really modest distance in their entire lifetime, but compounded across thousands of generations, that modest movement added up to genuinely staggering distances. Section 1. Built for the journey. The human body as the ultimate travel tool. Because it turns out, to pull this global expansion off, our very first tool was our own biology, which was perfectly adapted for sustained overland movement. Think about this. 10 to 20 miles. We are quite literally built to walk. Research studying contemporary hunter-gatherer and traditional walking-based societies shows us that covering 10 to 20 miles in a single day, on foot, while carrying supplies, wasn't considered some extraordinary athletic feat. It wasn't an Olympic event. It was just a casual stroll for them, a normal, sustainable daily baseline for populations whose bodies were conditioned for it from childhood. Which, let's be honest, really puts our modern sedentary lifestyles into perspective.
And what's incredibly fascinating is how our physiology directly enabled this. The exact same physical traits used for persistence hunting, our remarkably efficient sweating system, our upright bipedal walking gait, gave us this massive capacity for sustained, moderate-intensity physical exertion. We were naturally engineered to tackle these incredible distances, generation after generation, simply by putting one foot in front of the other.
Section 2. Climate Shortcuts and Geography. Exploiting a shifting Earth. Now, ancient humans didn't just rely on physical endurance alone. They were smart. They took direct strategic advantage of a changing planet to cross seemingly impossible barriers. Picture this. During the last glacial period, enormous quantities of the planet's water became locked up in massive ice sheets. This caused global sea levels to drop considerably, which exposed wide, temporary land connections. The most famous of these, of course, is Beringia, a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. This allowed ancient human populations to simply walk directly from Asia into the Americas. They didn't need miraculous maritime technology to cross an ocean. They just followed game animals across what was, at the time, perfectly ordinary, walkable land. And this brilliantly illustrates how our ancestors used the Earth's climate cycles to their absolute advantage. Take the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, connecting the Horn of Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. Today, it's a significant body of water. But during these specific Ice Age climate periods, it was considerably narrower and so much more crossable. These weren't just travel routes. They were temporary, climate-driven geographic shortcuts that made the initial migrations out of Africa and into the Americas possible. Section 3. Mastering the Open Ocean. The independent invention of the boat. Of course, eventually, the land bridges ended, but human ingenuity didn't stop there. When faced with vast stretches of water, we developed entirely new, highly sophisticated maritime technologies to conquer the waves. Here is the crucial point to take away. Boat technology wasn't some single, universal invention that started in one place and spread everywhere like a viral trend. It was a series of countless independent, regional solutions, each tailored perfectly to local environments.
So for example, in Polynesia, they built double-hulled outrigger canoes for deep ocean settlement. In the Mediterranean and South America, they used local reeds for coastal travel. And up in the Arctic, where timber was practically non-existent, they brilliantly used animal hides stretched over bone frames to create lightweight, super durable watercraft. And the navigation techniques they developed? Genuinely awe-inspiring. To cross hundreds or even thousands of miles of open ocean, Polynesian navigators obviously didn't have written charts or satellite GPS. Instead, they memorized this complex, integrated system of environmental cues. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just memorizing. It was entirely internalizing their environment. They tracked star patterns, watched specific cloud formations, and monitored the flight paths of island-nesting seabirds. They could even detect unseen islands purely by feeling how the landmass disrupted the surrounding ocean swells. It's a level of practiced environmental sensitivity that modern researchers find genuinely difficult to fully replicate today. But this practical maritime experimentation stretches back even further than the Polynesians. Deep in prehistoric human migration, we find Australia's 65,000-year-old mystery. Reaching Australia from Southeast Asia required crossing a significant stretch of open water. We're talking water deep enough that it was never exposed as land, not even during the most extreme glacial periods. Think about that for a second. Tens of thousands of years before the wheel was even a concept, humans were deliberately navigating the open ocean. It completely proves we were experimenting with watercraft way, way earlier than historical narratives usually suggest. Section 4. Pack Animals and Trade. Upgrading Overland Travel. So while boats allowed us to conquer the oceans and utilize river systems as ancient highways, our ancestors eventually hit a massive wall when it came to crossing vast, harsh overland terrain. Walking is genuinely impressive on its own, for sure, but human muscle power has a strict practical limit. You can only carry so much heavy water, equipment, and trade material on your own back across a scorching, arid landscape. If you want to move further, go faster, and carry more, especially for the purpose of long-distance trade, which connected communities across vast distances, you need a major upgrade. The technological solution to this bottleneck was the domestication of pack animals. By teaming horses, donkeys, llamas, and particularly camels, we drastically expanded our travel capacity. Camels, with their remarkable physiological tolerance for extreme heat and their ability to go long periods without water, were an absolute game changer. Once they were paired with the development of effective saddle technology to properly balance heavy cargo, this instantly transformed brutal, impassable deserts into vital trade routes across the Sahara and the Arabian Peninsula. And humans applied this exact same logic to completely opposite environmental extremes. Up in the absolutely lethal, freezing environments of the Arctic and subarctic, standard walking or traditional pack animals like horses would have been entirely impractical, if not an outright death sentence. So, the animal upgrade took the form of specialized sleds and domesticated dogs, specifically bred and trained for pulling. This allowed efficient travel and survival in conditions that would otherwise be completely unforgiving. Section 5. The Power of Shared Knowledge. The generational legacy. Because here is the bottom line. None of these incredible feats, whether surviving the ice, crossing hostile deserts, or navigating the open oceans, were possible through sheer physical toughness alone. They required our greatest survival tool of all. A successful multi-month journey across completely unfamiliar territory wasn't a solo effort. It was the ultimate group project. It was a highly coordinated social achievement based on shared environmental knowledge. Ancient travelers had to know exactly how to engineer water storage solutions, like treated animal skins or ceramics, to minimize evaporation. They had to know how to read subtle changes in vegetation to find hidden water sources, and how to time their departures perfectly with seasonal weather and wind patterns. This enormous body of practical science wasn't figured out by one genius on a Tuesday. It was built collectively, tested, refined, and passed down through intense oral traditions, generation after generation. And today, modern genetic research is actually stepping in to confirm exactly what this accumulated knowledge achieved. Because, let's face it, physical archaeological remains, like wooden boats or animal skins, frequently fail to survive intact across these enormous timescales. So researchers are now analyzing genetic markers and mutation patterns in modern populations. This has allowed them to trace these approximate migration routes and timelines with incredible precision, physically proving how these slow, steady movements successfully mapped out the entire globe. Which leaves us with a really profound realization to wrap up this explainer. Our species didn't populate the Earth through isolated heroics or one single brilliant invention. We did it through patient, shared knowledge, careful observation of our environment, and the persistent willingness of each successive generation to simply walk or sail just a little bit further than the generation that came before them. So the next time you look at a map of the world, ask yourself, what boundaries are we quietly pushing past today for the generations that will follow us? Thanks so much for joining.